Hello there, and welcome to episode 8 of Nothing Else Mattress, the music podcast that's setting out to try and establish what are the definitive 100 best albums ever made. To do that, we are first of all reviewing the latest Rolling Stone list of their top 100 albums. We're voting some in and out, and once we've done that, we'll get the chance to add some of our own in, hopefully, and have some debate about that. We've reviewed 35 so far on the Rolling Stone list, and at the moment there's 20 voted in out of that. However, I'll come back to that in a second. So first of all, some introductions. So from the right, we've got Stephen. Hi Stephen, how you doing, mate?
Good evening, everybody. How you doing?
Very good, sir. Very good.
Evening. Good evening.
Lisa, how are we?
I'm very good, thanks.
Let's see you're feeling better.
Good, yeah.
Mr. Patterson, George, how are we?
Good, thank you.
Nice to see you back again, mate. And we also have a special guest tonight, who is Scottish singer-songwriter, all things Friends Again, and latterly the Bathers, Chris Thomson. Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
Hiya. Nice. Hello.
We are not worthy, and you're not wrong. You're amongst fans, Chris. I can assure you.
Oh, that is reassuring.
You're very reassuring.
He knows that.
So we'll crack on in a second with our first album for this evening. However, last week when we voted on John Coltrane, I Love Supreme, there was 5 of us on the call. George wasn't there, but John Welsh was on, and we voted 3-2 not to put it on. However, George had voted offline on it and voted as a yes, and we are giving him the opportunity to potentially use his veto. Every member of the panel has a veto for one album on the list that they can either vote in or vote out. And we know George's a big fan, so before we kick off on tonight's, we're giving George the floor to see what he wants to do. Don't know whether his Zoom sign's a bit of a giveaway tonight. George Patterson loves to veto. So George, all yours, mate. What are you thinking?
I love the album. It's as a jazz head, it's just one of the go-to albums. But am I only getting one veto for this? I can't use it. I think you're all fucking Philistines for not voting it in, but the ones who you as well, you're a Philistine, right? But you're not a Philistine.
I think he's pointing at me, I think, to be fair.
I'm pointing at you, and I'm pointing at Stephen and John Welsh. The three of you can go and...
Well, that way I can't get used to this, because when you actually point, I think you're pointing at me.
Right.
Yeah, everyone's
anyway,
getting it. So you're not using a veto for this one?
I can't commit to using a veto, because I may have to use it later on, especially if any Rush pops up on the charts.
And it may well do, as you know.
It's highly unlikely, but there you go.
Chris, just top of your head, would you put I Love Supreme in the top 100 ever album?
I think I would, based on some of the things that are in that list. Yeah, I think I'd happily substitute that one. One
thing we did say in our defence, George, was that we know Coltrane plays a big part on Kind of Blue, which is still to come. So absolutely. I think we're all moving towards that position, hopefully. So cool. Okay, let's stay out then. So we're 20 out of 35. So we've got 5 again tonight. Let's crack on. First one from the Rolling Stone list is James Brown live at the Apollo. So I'll just read the summary of the Rolling Stone review, and then we'll crack on. This may be the greatest live album ever recorded. From the breathless build-up of the spooky intro, through terse, sweat-soaked early hits such as Try Me and Think, into 11 minutes of the raw ballad Lost Someone. It climaxes with a frenzied 9-song medley and ends with Night Train. Live at the Apollo is pure, uncut soul, and it almost didn't happen. James Brown defied King Records boss's opposition to a live album by arranging to record a show himself. On 24th October 1962, the last date of a run at Harlem's Apollo Theatre. His intuition proved correct. Live at the Apollo, the first of 4 albums Brown recorded there, charted for 66 weeks. So that's Rolling Stone, number 65, Live at the Apollo, released in May 1963. George, what's your take on this one?
I hadn't listened to it for a long time. It's one of those albums that, done the rounds back in the 80s we were all into getting into soul for the first time. You know, as teenagers, we were all getting, you know, delving further and further back into the annals of soul. And this was one of the albums that I would have went to time and time again with, along with Ike and Tina Turner and Otis Redding and those great Stax compilations that I mentioned in previous episodes. So that's the first time I've heard it in a long time, and it's much more subtle and less frenetic than I remembered it. In my mind's eye, I remembered it being, you know, a lot more full of life, and it didn't feel that way when I listened back to it over the last couple of days. It struck me when I was listening back to it. It was recorded at a time when James Brown was trying to work out in what direction he wanted to take his sound. I think the fact that Jackie Wilson and Sam Cooke are not only better singers than James Brown, but had greater songs, probably pushed him into creating his own sound in itself. That unique hard funk sound that came late 60s, early 70s, you know, it's one of the most unique sounds in modern music. By all accounts, he's a monstrous human being, but if we had to sack people for the list because they were arseholes, then we'd be lucky to have a top 10.
Yeah.
You can't deny the impact that that he and the album had. But for
66 weeks on the chart.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, you know, Bat Out of Hell was in the chart for like fucking 800 weeks, and it's,
Get on the list, mate.
I don't know. But I would say if I had to choose one, whether it's the greatest live album of all time, it's one of the most influential, 100%. But if I had to choose a live soul album from the same era, I'd go with Sam Cooke's Live from the Harlem Square in Miami, which was recorded. It was recorded in January '63, so less than 3 months after.
Yep.
After James Brown's Apollo show, and that is genuinely thrilling. That would be far higher up my chart than James Brown Live at the Apollo, but because of its influence and because of the stratospheric rocket it placed under Brown's tightly clad arse, I would say, yeah, it probably has to go in, but I'd still go for Sam Cooke.
And we can come back to Sam Cooke. So when you said it's not as frenetic as you remember it being, is that the song choices, or is it the mood or the production? What do you mean by that?
The whole thing. The sound of the band. I don't think the band he had at the time adapted and developed the deeper into the 60s they get tighter and tighter and became more of a proper hard funk band. And I found that he was a wee bit stuck in between going for that sound and trying to appeal to a sort of more cabaret audience. And I felt with the big long medleys of some of his biggest hits, it felt quite cabaret-ish. So it's a lot more cabaret than I remembered it being. And that was disappointing. I think you can see the difference from this, and then I think it was 2 years later, the Tammy Show. I don't know if you've heard of the Tammy Show.
Yep.
You ever watched that, the Tammy Show, and watched James Brown then? There's a marked difference between Live at the Apollo and what he did at the Tammy Show. So those 2 years were crucial for him going, right, this is what I'm taking it. Became less cabaret and more about, the show and the event. So, as I say, it's a seminal album. I can't deny that. Whether I'd put it in the top hundreds, I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to
that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So he recorded it. His record label didn't want to do this, and he put his own money up to pay for the recording and the post-production and what have you, because I guess he did need that break to try and get his live sound or his live act out to a bigger public. And as I say, not only was it billboardly big, but down in the south it was huge, and that was a market that he wasn't really getting to at that point, and they basically couldn't get enough of that. And the other thing about it was that, you know, we have this chat about live albums and compilations and what have you. And I guess we'll have this chat in the vote, but it is a sort of pure live album. It was recorded in one night at Harlem, so it's not one of these kind of world tour things that they pick the best of. So I don't know whether that influences the length of it, because it's only 31 minutes. No, although the songs are all quite short, there's a medley there, but, you know, obviously 31 minutes isn't particularly long for anyone's kind of live set. So my guess is they were knocking it out and picking the best bits. So you're right, George, that there are kind of other things in there to take on board, but it's still quite a powerful statement in itself, I think. Lisa, Stephen, what's your take? Lisa.
Me. There's not much I can add to what
James Brown. Are you a James Brown fan?
Yeah, like George said, we were really getting into that in the 80s. You know, we were out clubbing, and this older music was really playing a lot in the clubs, and, you know, it was really popular. I hadn't actually listened to this album, but I'm wondering, Mr. Welsh isn't here, but is this one of these ones he would just say absolutely not because it's a live album?
Well, he has a vote on it, so he has voted virtually.
Did not mention that.
I'll share that with you once we've all had a view on it.
Am I talking rubbish? Was it just compilations?
No, he has a view on live as well.
Compilations.
Do you know what's funny? It's something I'm thinking about and having a discussion about, and I mean, I enjoyed the album. I don't think it packed as much punch as I was expecting it to.
Okay.
But this thing about should it be in the top 100 albums?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure. Interesting comparison. So I'm just going back to a conversation I had, and if you think about classical music compared to popular music, so classical music obviously has been written traditionally for paper, right? And you get one piece of classical music, and you could buy the same one time and time again with different musicians, different audiences. So if you take Rachmaninoff's piano concerto, you could have Horowitz playing it, you could have Rachmaninoff playing it, and they'll be completely different, but it's the same music. I don't know whether that informs this or not. I don't know. It's just an interesting conversation about whether one thinks that, you know, a live album should be a sort of like a popular album should be in the top 100.
Yeah,
I don't particularly hold a view on that myself, because although I'm comparing them, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just not sure this one would be in my top 100.
Okay, Stephen.
Lisa just stole the words out of my mouth. I come back to this I said last week. Yeah, I love it. It's great. I think it sounds, of course, it sounds dated, but I think it sounds a bit tinny. I think it sounds a bit weak. And as Lisa says, what, the top 100 albums of all time? Nah, not a chance.
So it's interesting then, because I think I mentioned in the blurb there, he did record other live albums quite a lot actually, and I think he went back to the Apollo two or three times.
Yeah.
And obviously in 62, 63, he hadn't quite reached his commercial peak, so I think around 65.
He also didn't have the kit. You've got to think about how crap the Beatles sounded those days.
Yeah, that's fair. But as George just said, there's a Sam Cooke record from pretty much the same time down in Florida that blew you away, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Is that better production? Just purely better production?
I don't know.
It's a smaller club as well. It's a club called the Harlem Square Club. But
Miami, yeah.
Have you heard it, Brian?
I have. I actually had it on the other day, George. Somebody recommended it to me yonks ago, and I thought about it when I thought about the James Brown record. And I mean, I really like the James Brown record, but the Sam Cooke thing's fantastic. Absolutely,
it's night and day. It's a guy who was easily capable of being, you know, the housewife's favourite, just tearing it up in a way that I'd never heard before. So it added another dimension to Sam Cooke's appeal to me.
I mean, of course, there's nothing to stop us voting Sam Cooke on either. I don't know if that's what we choose to do, but I think it's quite a fair comparison. Whether this one's valid, I was just going to say on the live album. Sorry, Stephen.
Sorry, can somebody? I watched write this down. The Sam Cooke album again is called what?
Live at the Harlem Square in Miami.
Brilliant.
So it's confusing because it's called the Harlem Square, but it's not in New York.
Yeah, I know.
On 25th Street, it's it's Miami.
And I was going to say that the Apollo follow-up recordings, which obviously aren't on the list, they're very good records, and they've also got arguably better songs on them, because you've got Papa's Got a Bag, I Feel Good, That's Man's World. That stuff is in his repertoire in the late 60s, whereas at the moment it isn't really. So I think it's quite interesting that they've put this in for what I think's the kind of rawness of the record, sort of making a statement. And obviously he subsequently became bigger and more popular as he went through 60s into the 70s. But it's quite interesting. Chris, tell us what you think about James Brown.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what I've heard. James Brown, massive. Hearing it in the clubs in the 80s, it was fantastic. I did go and see James Brown in Glasgow. I don't know if anyone else did, when he came and played at the Armadillo. But by that point, when we use the word cabaret, it's sort of a bit of a super cartoon version of what one imagines was the classic period, late 60s. He was going through the motions a little bit, I think it would be fair to say. But what motions, they were.
When was that, Chris?
That would be about late 99, I think, 98, 99.
Okay.
It was the very early days of the Armadillo, so not a great venue either, I don't think, for atmosphere. But I mean, he certainly put on a show when he was on the stage. What's that?
But still not.
Yeah,
still not. No,
still not exactly. Interesting points about Sam Cooke, and I'd love. I think I actually have heard. I have heard live Sam Cooke stuff in the past and absolutely loved them. I'm not sure if it was the same album, but I'll check that out.
Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at the list. A quick glance down. I don't think anything by Sam Cooke is on the 100, is it?
Not at the moment. No, we do get another James Brown record on the 100.
Do we? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting. Maybe Sam Cooke. I actually prefer Sam Cooke as a singer. Whereas, I mean, I love them both, but Sam Cooke edges it for me. And maybe the sheer amount of songs that I love within Sam Cooke's repertoire as well. But I'm wondering, I've kind of gone down the route of having several Sam Cooke compilations, so I'm not sure if he's actually got a classic album as such.
I'd probably agree with that.
It's a series of great singles.
It was a great singles act. That's
So maybe just on the cusp of the great album era or something, where singles more important. But looking at this James Brown album, I think I would probably be persuadable that it should remain in this 100, almost as a representation of James Brown. But you say there's another one in there. What is the other one?
It's a compilation.
Is it compilations?
Here we go.
Here we go. Is that a controversy? Yeah. Okay. So I mean, a couple of details I loved. I did love the screaming. It was almost that. I love the atmosphere of that. I mean, that was absolutely superb. And I love the wee story that the master tape was lost for such a long time.
Yeah.
And the guy stumbling across it in the vault. I mean, that's a moment of magic, to sort of looking for something else. And he said, oh, hang on, James Brown at the Apollo, when the master tapes have been lost for I think this is in the early 2000s or something.
It was.
I mean, I kind of get a bit of a charge just imagining being there in that moment. Wow. So yeah, a lot of positive things about it. Better things came up later as well in terms of recordings, but as I say, persuadable that it should be in the 100.
Okay. I mean, he was a 60s icon. I think 70s onwards, his life and his career took a bit of a turn, didn't it?
Yeah.
He made a few dodgy choices. He was hanging about with Nixon and people like that, which I guess is questionable, especially if you're black and from that that kind of background. That probably didn't land that well with his core audience, I guess.
Yes.
But his 60s stuff is is, you know, fantastic, and it is part of the folklore. I noticed that when they started the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the first batch of inductees, as you can imagine, were the people who sort of started rock and roll popular music, soul as we know it, and obviously he was in there. And the first 10, Chuck Berry, Sam Cooke, Buddy Holly, Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, I mean, all the guys you'd expect to be in there. And he sort of took his place there through merit, I think.
Yeah,
very much so.
So, you know, maybe that gives us a wee bit of kind of context about him.
Sure.
There's not much more to add, really. As I say, Rolling Stone sort of reckoned it was the best album ever. We're doing our own list, aren't we? So we all like an opinion. It's interesting. I went and had a quick look at that list because I'd never saw it before. So that was number one. Number two, in fact, I was going to let you guess. You never get this in a million years. Number two is the Allman Brothers band, live at Fillmore East.
Live at Fillmore East, yeah, it's a great album.
Yeah, I know it, George, but I wouldn't fall my sword for it being top three.
No,
you know,
it's a really good album, but it's I wouldn't have.
Number three, maybe. Number three's maybe more worst thing. That's Johnny Cash at Folsom. So that's, you know, sort of proper iconic live album, you know, of its time and what have you. So, but yeah, so I think, you know, live albums are a difficult one to call. Whether they should or shouldn't be on the album is on the list, as Lisa said. I guess that's for us to vote. So, Twitter were 59% no on this one. Which is a wee bit surprised about. I thought it might be a bit of a sweet spot.
I'm surprised with that.
Yeah,
but they were, and obviously did, you know, kick on. So guys like Sly, Funkadelic, Edwin Starr, of course Jackson adored them. Prince, of course. You know, so you can see what came out of that. I read quite a nice interview with what's his name? Is it Wayne Kramer from MC5?
Yeah,
This album begat the Kick Out the Jams.
Yeah.
A different sound, of course, but he says that kind of energy and intensity and stuff, that was everything they were trying to do. And that's what was in the clubs around Detroit at the time. So, quite sort of powerful statement, I guess.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So let's, as we have to do, let's have a vote. So we will go guess first. Chris, what we're thinking, mate, in or out?
In.
In, okay. Stephen?
Absolutely in.
Absolutely in. Lisa?
I'm going to say out.
Okay.
I would. His fashion sense at that point was a lot better than any. But I get that's to do with his background, and he wanted to prove how well he'd done, and the bling came out. But no, I'm going to say out.
Okay, no bother.
Although I suffer from imposter syndrome every time I make a decision, so I've just got to go with it.
Okay. George?
As an album, it's not great, but there's enough stuff there to make me think that it's to make me accept that it is, as I said before, a seminal album, a seminal piece of work. So for that, I would have to say, it would have to go in. But I wouldn't think it was one of the greatest of all time, but I'll put them in.
Okay, thank you. I would also put it in, but I think more for the posterity of what it means and what happened after it, rather than for the 31 minutes that you're sitting listening to. I think you're right, George. There's probably arguably better live soul albums kind of out there. Just picking up John's vote. So John said James Brown not having a live album, it's another nonsense.
Help you.
Yeah.
But he is outvoted on this one with 4-2. So Mr. Brown goes on the list.
He's got a veto, Brian.
He has got a veto as well, of course. Yeah,
I don't think he'll use it for this one.
I don't think he will. I think he's making a point, I think. Cool. So it's in, and the only other live album I had to call out, and George is absolutely right about Sam Cooke, but another one, if you haven't heard it, is Jerry Lee Lewis live at the Star Club, Hamburg.
Oh,
So he went to Hamburg to kind of find himself, you know, that kind of Beatles journey. He did it after being famous, and he then heard the James Brown and the Sam Cooke records and realised that actually what he did was live, and he went over there and smashed it for. I was there a few months and played like loads of sets and stuff, and it's great. Same thing, 30 minutes. It's absolutely brilliant. So
Excellent. Great.
Worth a listen. Cool. That was James Brown. Right. Where are we? 64. 64 is Outkast, Stankonia. So, Rolling Stone, there's a thrilling sprawl on Outkast's fourth album, a sense of limitless possibilities within the boundaries of hip-hop. Big Boy and Andre 3000 rap about baby mamas, the perils of sex and alcohol, feeling excluded from the American dream, good manners, and the trauma of teen pregnancy. The music is sexy, bold and hard, mixing on B.O.B., distorted metal guitar, a gospel choir, and a jittery techno beat. Big Boy says Outkast is, quote, cooler than a polar bear's toenails, unquote, as that they are just lyrically twerking, and tells the police, officer, get off us, sir. We call it slumadelic, said Andre 3000. So that's the Rolling Stone summary for Outkast, Stankonia. It was released in October 2000. Chris, I'm going to be brave and ask you, mate, to lead on this one. I know. I've got a feeling this is your sweet spot, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
What do you think of this?
Well, I come from a position of fairly deep ignorance about this genre generally. I do, probably to be absolutely honest, the only Outkast thing I was aware of was the massive hit single. Hey Ya. Is it Hey Ya? Hey Ya, yeah. Which, yeah,
don't worry.
That's great. I've always, so I've checked this out. I must admit I was quite dejected when I saw it ran to an hour and 13 minutes. so I'll be honest, I haven't listened to the whole thing, but
okay.
I didn't dislike, I liked it. I didn't, it's no really strong feelings. I think it would something you'd have to really live with and get into the the quite dense lyrical content and everything, get into that world. So very difficult to just dip in from a cold start.
And sort of hip hop stroke rap, any of that genre, would that tick your box at all? Or is it any stuff in that you'd listen to?
I like things in passing, but it's never really been something I've listened to in any depth. I've got very much a passing knowledge of the whole thing. It's definitely not my go-to music, but yeah. So
and if you went back the way, then if you went back to say, I don't know, Prince, for example, would you be getting closer to liking? Prince?
I was much more aware of Prince. Yeah, I mean, again, from the 80s club scene when 1999 came on in 1980, when was it, 82 or something like that came out. That was quite that was a revelation.
Because these guys are, very much sort of derivative of some of what he had done, and pay a lot of homage and stuff to him. Because obviously by 2000, Prince was, I mean, he wasn't off the grid, but he certainly wasn't punching his weight.
Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting pointer if I go back and listen again to try and spot the through lines there and things. I mean, it's sort of it didn't really do much for me either way. It sounded perfectly good. I wouldn't knock it. I just kind of left me a little bit cold as some of this stuff does.
Okay, and 73 minutes is a fair point. I think we all talk about album lengths, and it appears to be something that's became more prominent through sort of CDs and streaming.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas the classic album, 5 songs either side or whatever, there was a sort of finality to doing that. There's quite a lot of that going on. So this was a 4 studio album. They were pretty big by this point. So they've actually got another album in the top 100. So
I noticed that,
in the top 100.
Yeah.
And I think there's only, 5 or 6 artists, I think, at the moment that have that. So, whatever we think, there's something going on from the kind of critics' perspective that obviously they really rate them. So we've got another one to go, guys, is my heads up on that one.
Oh, God.
They are kind of still going, but they haven't done a record now for the thick end of 16, 17 years now. So sort of living more on solo stuff and what have you. So not quite your thing, Chris, I guess, is
not my thing. Am I allowed to give a verdict at this stage, or is that?
It's entirely up to you. You can wait.
I would say, probably no surprise, I would say it wouldn't make any 100. I would, and that's probably just my lack of knowledge or lack of being steeped in it. But it doesn't sound like a 100 best of all time to me on kind of casual listen.
That's why you're on, mate. for your
Thank you.
opinion. Who wants to follow Chris?
Me.
Go on then.
Chris, you're not alone. I think it's got funky bits. I think it's got fantastic bits. Some of it I love. But again, at 1:30, what was it?
An hour and 13.
Man, oh man, that's just too much.
Yeah.
You know, that to me, that's a double album and a bit.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
but
that's okay. It's okay if it's packed jam full of songs, right? You know, I guess the White Album's 80 odd minutes long, right?
Yeah.
You know, so that
you're comparing the White Album to Outkast.
No, but you know, you can have great records that have long playing time. They're not mutually exclusive. No.
Which is why Chris is quite right. In here, yes, it has its high points. It's fantastic in parts, and I find myself bopping along a little bit. Sorry, you don't want to see that, but it's far too long. It's far too convoluted, and there's no way in this earth it's one of the top 100 albums of all time.
Okay, thanks for that.
That's a relief.
when these guys weren't making their albums, including this one, they've done quite a lot of collaborations and stuff. I thought it was interesting. One of the collaborations that Andre 3000's done is with Frank Ocean.
I've heard that. Actually.
And he's actually on the Blonde album that we voted in a few episodes ago. So, and again, I think we were quite surprised about Frank Ocean. We thought, we weren't sure about him, got quite impressed by when we listened to the record, and guys like Andre 3000 were on there doing stuff as well. So you can see there's a lot of links going through this.
There's also going to be crossovers. We can't catch them all.
No, get that. Yeah. Absolutely get that, mate. Yeah. But so Lisa, what are you thinking?
Well, 2000, that it's a bit of a kind of grey area for me, because I had 3 very, very young children at that point, and I feel as if I had slipped away from music quite a bit. Just no time, and I wasn't really aware of what was going on, what was coming out, what was new. I do remember the single from this album, Miss Jackson, about the
it was very big as well. Big.
Baby Mama's. Is that the one? Have I got
Baby's
that right?
Mama's. Yep.
Mama's. And that was for a rap album that was quite commercial and did really well, and kind of stands out, I think, in the album. It was I've only listened to it about twice, and possibly the first time, like Chris, I didn't listen the whole way through, because I think I maybe wandered off to do a wee bit of ironing or something. But some struck me the saying, and this isn't very deep at all, but it struck me that there was what's this the track, is it We Love Them Hoes? Have I got it here?
Yes, it.
Is it? Instantly reminded me of Eminem. If you listen to the music, and also some of the way they rap, just sounds so much like Eminem, and it's just something that came into my head. I could be completely wrong, but just that kind of pattern in the music just sounded really similar to Slim Shady.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I just had a wee quick check, and I saw that in that year, so Eminem's album came out in May and theirs came out in October, and I just wondered if even a slight possibility, tiny bit of an influence. I do not know.
Every chance, I'm sure. Every chance.
That's a lot from me, but I mean, I did enjoy it. I do think it's a good. I quite enjoyed listening to it, especially the second time around, because it was becoming a wee bit more familiar. But I feel as if every week there's so much rap and hip hop on for a top 100, and for one genre to have such a huge part.
Sure.
I'm not sure. Maybe it's to do with the when this chart was, this. What is it? Chart was made up.
Yeah, 2020. I don't think so. I think a lot of this stuff. This is 20 years old by then.
I said episode 1. It's very American.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say that actually, and it's quite American. So maybe those kind of influences are maybe more so in this than in what would be top 100 in our minds.
Yeah, but we voted NWA on. I can't think of anything more American than that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying
so they're not exclusive, are they?
Absolutely not. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that there seems to be every week we seem to be reviewing quite a lot of that already. Which isn't a problem for me because I like it. I love it. You know, it was just a.
I was just having a look at next week's the next episode's list there, and there isn't any rap on it, so, or hip hop for that matter. So you'll be pleased to know when you get you back on, Chris, when you get a clean run. Come on to George in a second. So talked about success. Number 2 Billboard when it came out first week, 5,000 copies first week. Jay-Z was number 1, U2 were number 3. So, you know, kind of in the big boys a little bit. 4 times platinum by 2003. 3 fairly big hit singles. Number 10 in the UK as well. To be fair, it was fairly well recognised. This is before Hey Ya, which obviously did sort of make them a bit over here more than America. Only place it didn't do particularly well was Australia. So Australia was only number 33 in Australia, the album. So not sure what that tells us about Men at Work and all the other guys down there. And a couple of other things, and then we'll come to George. Your man, I think Andre 3000, I think, had a relationship with Erykah Badu, who is on the record on Humble Mumble. So we reviewed one of her records back a bit now. I think David Ross might have been on for that one. So again, quite interesting as well.
I've actually listened to her album again. I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too, actually, yeah. But we had that chat, didn't we, about...
That was the first. And before George comes on, can I just say what I was saying about rap was not a complaint.
Okay.
In any way, just an observation.
Observations are good, and so are complaints. George?
I've been mispronouncing this album for years. I've been calling it Stankaconia. And it's only, I've been calling it that for 20 years now, 20 odd years.
Wow.
I genuinely thought it was called Stankaconia. And I'd heard the thing.
Yeah.
So I felt a bit foolish going, no, it's just Stankonia. It's not Stankaconia.
Anyway, the idea it was a kind of place, isn't it? The idea is it's a bit of a kind of
a funky kind of place. Yeah.
Yeah. You can go do anything you want, be where you want to be.
I get that now. For years I was like, Stankaconia.
Stankaconia.
Yeah, it's like Marx Brothers territory or something.
Yeah, you know? I think I'm sure he played for Red Star Bucharest or someone, didn't he? Stankaconia.
In my mind, that's what I had. But the first thing I heard from Outkast was Miss Jackson back when it came out, and I really liked it. And I found it when Outkast are really good as they are on things like I'll Call Before I Come, So Fresh, So Clean, Bombs Over Baghdad, and obviously Hey Ya, which came later. I think they're really, really good when they are good. That said, I didn't enjoy the album as much as I remembered liking it back when I first heard it in the early 2000s. It just felt, I wouldn't say dated, but it just didn't have the same snap that I was hoping it would have, that the other tracks had. The ones that I did like had the sort of Sly Stone kind of vibe to them. And obviously Sly, there's a real influence of Sly and the Family Stone with, you know, the album cover with the flag and stuff, very much like there's a riot going on. So you can see that they're clearly wearing their influences front and centre.
And it's an actual flag as well. So they got it made, and it's got their studio, haven't they? So the flag takes a wall up in their studio. So it's a sort of permanent thing.
As much as I didn't like it, I can definitely draw a line from this to a lot of the sort of the kind of lo-fi hip hop soul that is out at the moment, the kind of things that my boy listens to, like Steve Lacy and Tyler the Creator. So it's definitely been a big influence on those guys. But I just felt in isolation the album didn't really cut it for me. There was not enough in the the hour and a bit to keep me interested, despite me liking a couple of the tunes in it. There was just no enough in it for me. As I say, when they're good, they're really good, but in this album, they're not good enough.
So we've had this chat before, so is your feeling that if this was a 40, 45 minute album,
yeah,
they would be knocking it out?
I'd edited this into about 40 minutes, 8 songs, 40 minutes, and I think you could have made this an absolute belter of an album. There's too much. There was too much filler in this one for me to class it as a top 100 album.
Okay. We've had that chat before, haven't we? Twitter was 93% no.
Wow.
Which has been a bit of a thread, to be fair. We've voted a few in that the guys who chat to us haven't been so keen on. But that's obviously sort of fairly strong. No. I don't have much to add, really. I think, as I say, it was very successful. They are massively influential. I think they continue to be around sort of production and stuff like that. It won Grammys. They've won other stuff. And a couple of things just to finish. I did read that when they were recording the album, they purposely didn't listen to any hip hop or any of their sort of peer group at the time. Back to that Stankonia thing, George, they wanted to just go out there and listen to what they want to listen to, whatever that was, which I thought was kind of quite brave. And they were fairly big fans of rave at the time. So they were trying to bring some of that kind of sound, and some of the songs are quite up, aren't they? Some of the sort of BPMs and stuff are pretty far out, pretty heavy. So,
but the ones that I liked best of this in this album were the sort of the more melodic cuts, and the more there's 3 or 4 of them on the album that I was like, yeah, lyrically adept, melodic. They were the ones that I related to rather than the straight out hip hop ones.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because we've got another album to review from them relatively quickly, which I think is probably a bit more of that kind of sound and and rhythm. But we can get to that. Right. Okay then. So, Stephen, what we taking, mate? Are we in or out for Outkast?
Far too long. Out.
Outkast are out.
Out.
Chris.
Out.
They're definitely out. Yeah, definitely.
Outkast are out.
Yeah, it's out.
Lisa.
Oh, I'm gonna cast them out, I'm afraid. I don't care what they definitely been listening to Eminem. Definitely, you listen to that. No, I'm joking. But just out of interest, come back to me on this. Listen to that song and then listen to Slim Shady. Honestly, it's just so similar. Yeah. Coincidence, clearly, but it
it's
happens.
Just
my head when I heard it.
It happens. George.
Out for me.
Okay. I'm going to vote it in, which is incidental because I don't have enough votes, but because I think they probably deserve to have one on the list, albeit I do take your point, Lisa, about the kind of American influence and what have you, but hip hop and modern hip hop and southern hip hop, these guys
that's
again.
That's not the reason I'm voting it out though.
No, but these guys are quite important because they came from kind of REM territory. They were down in Atlanta way, and again, that really wasn't a thing at the time. They almost kind of created something that wasn't there before, and I'm always quite impressed when people start from nothing and all of a sudden they kind of they manage to create a sound and be successful. So I would vote it in, and surprisingly, John voted it in as well.
Okay.
But it does still take it out, so it's 4 votes out. So for the moment, Outkast aren't on the list. My PS to that before we move on, didn't want to influence you at all, Lisa, was that latterly Big Boy has just recorded and produced a collaboration with Kate Bush, which is just about to be released. So
there's one thing I'd like to add to that.
So
I'd like to add something to that.
Go on then.
Big Boy, it was on the Hey Ya single.
All right.
I had the single, but on the single they did a version of My Favorite Things, but they did the John Coltrane version. They did a version of John Coltrane version of My Favorite Things, and I was like, this is fucking great. It was like heavy dance beat, like 200 beats per minute stuff.
Right.
I found it really interesting. So that's how we link to John Coltrane.
Good. I'm glad you got that in there, George. Well
I
done, mate.
did, yeah.
Okay, cool. So the Outkast are out. So what we got now? We've got 63. 63 is Steely Dan in Asia. Hope I pronounced that right. I'm not too sure about that.
Asia,
right?
and the continent.
Like Asia, right. Okay.
The continent, yeah.
If you were an audiophile in the late 70s, you owned Asia. Steely Dan's sixth album is easy on the ears, thanks to both its meticulous production and its songs. This was Walter Becker and Donald Fagen's no-holds-barred stab at becoming a huge mainstream jazz pop success. And sure enough, thanks to sweet, slippery tracks like Deacon Blues and Peg, this collegiate band with a name plucked from a William Burroughs novel and a songbook full of smart, cynical lyrics became bona fide superstars, shooting to the top 5 and selling platinum. And yes, Asia even won a Grammy for Best Engineered Album. So that's Asia from Steely Dan, released in September 77 at the height of punk in the UK. So it doesn't get much braver than that. So who wants to lead first with Steely Dan? Who hasn't led yet?
Oh, probably me.
Come on, Steely Dan, Asia. Tell us, Lisa. You love it, don't you?
I do like it, actually. I do actually, and I even knew a couple of the tracks on it. Although I think the title track is pretty long, isn't it? It's about 8 minutes.
9 minutes or something.
It's about just under 8, just like me and my just under 7 foot. Sorry, people watching this wouldn't understand that. Well, it's certainly the ultimate in easy listening, isn't it? I mean, it's incredibly smooth, incredibly polished, brilliant production. Enjoyed the lyrics as well. It's not something that I would probably listen to very often, though. It's very much background music for me, but it kind of gives that feel of sort of 1970s New York, that kind of vibe. I do like it. And funny, we're pulling from other weeks, but I noticed that this one is Asia itself is like a mini suite in the way, like that sort of jazz. It's kind of jazzy, isn't it? It's jazz mini suite.
It is. Yeah.
In the way that Kate Bush's The Ninth Wave is a single suite in itself. So
and joining all that up, big John Coltrane fans, of course. Steely Dan, you know, they love all that classic jazz stuff. So you can see all those elements all coming in there. And so, you know, I think this was their 6th studio album. And they'd been sort of getting, you know, progressively more popular. I think Can't Buy a Thrill was the first one. Pretzel Logic was pretty popular, I think. But by this time, I think they're just a studio band, really. They've stopped doing live stuff, certainly for the foreseeable future. So it's quite a big sort of brave thing just to do their own record and take their time on it. Particularly not in America, but over here, of course, the landscape was changing fairly quickly at that time when that stuff came out. So Lisa, from your end, would you have been?
Sorry.
Would you have been listening to, you know, at any point on a Friday night when you guys do your vinyl night? Is Steely Dan on the turntable?
So I was going to say, I'm kind of a wee bit annoyed at myself. It's just one of those things, but I heavily influenced from my parents' record collection, and I do remember seeing Steely Dan, and I bet you it's still there. I could go and fish it out, but I couldn't tell you which one it was, because maybe they weren't playing it as much as they were playing the other things that would end up influencing me more. So I kind of feel a wee bit naive about Steely Dan, but yeah, I think now I think I'm maybe going to investigate a wee bit more.
Okay, well, maybe come back to that then.
I've probably got a Steely Dan album in there and don't know it. In fact, that'd be quite interesting. I'm going to check. They
had a sort of few hits and stuff, and not necessarily, they had some hits on this record, but you know, before that, really in the years and stuff were all, you know, fairly popular for them. And they did tour it out, and you know, got pretty big, to be fair. But as I say, they made this decision to kind of downsize. So at this point, there's really only 2 people in the band, and then there's a whole bunch.
And there were 40 musicians involved in making this album.
Yeah, I know.
So, you know, they had a bit of help there, so you would hope it would be good.
They did. Okay, that's interesting. Chris, tell me about everyone says they're a musicians band, you know, they're musos and all that
Indeed.
stuff. So what's your thoughts on Asia?
Indeed, you're absolutely right. A musicians band. This is a very conflicting, difficult one for me to assess because I've a lot of music friends from the Scottish scene who worship is a strong word, but it maybe is the right word. Who have really think Steely Dan are fantastic.
Do you want to name anyone?
Well, I could name former bandmates like James Grant, Paul McGee, all these guys that they kind of worship Steely Dan. Then you think of people like Deacon Blue, obviously. Yeah,
I hope so.
People like Davy Scott from the Pearlfishers. That they've
very big influence.
Big influence. Danny Wilson, I could hear that on the record. And I would have to say, just as a snapshot in passing, I'd have to say I found Gary Clark from Danny Wilson's voice. I would immediately associate that as being a more human, sort of appealing voice to me, which goes to the core of my take on Steely Dan. The elements are all there. I did enjoy it more in the second listen through. I love some of the guitar playing. I thought the lyrics were good. The drums are fantastic. It's all there, but the elements, I don't know. It never really sucks me in and connects with me in a kind of emotional level.
Okay.
It leaves me cold. I remember buying the Nightfly back in probably the early. And it's again one of those albums. Well, I couldn't ever get through the sort of the sheen of the thing, the sheer polish of it, and I don't want to. I didn't dislike it. It just didn't get through to me. And I was talking to my friend, another musician, Callum. I said, "What's your take on Steely Dan?" And he sort of said, slightly sheepishly, I really did. I had a sneaking admiration for them, even though we were all into Bowie and Iggy and all that stuff. So I'm trying to strip back my own potential prejudices, because you're right, 77, that was kind of a real miracle year for me of discovering music. I'm 15, it's Bowie, Iggy, punks exploding into starting to buy the music papers. So they were really anathema to me as a sort of a very, very polished American thing, as opposed to Talking Heads, television, Iggy and the Stooges, all the things that I was loving.
So
coming through America. So
on that point, then would Fleetwood Mac be an anathema to you as well at that point? Because they were 77 for Rumours, weren't they? I think.
The big end with Fleetwood Mac, of course, was that all the girls that you were trying to get friendly with had suddenly had Rumours. So it was like I kind of trained myself to like Rumours. And I think, to be fair to myself, I think it is a more accessible album, because it's got more of that sort of organic, kind of slightly raw emotions on the surface that I found more accessible. Steely Dan, I think I could grow to really like this. Having said all that, maybe I finally broken my Steely Dan jinx through this experience. And something I may come on to later with one of my recommendations for the 100, but there was a point in the album I suddenly recognised an absolute crossover with an album I adore, which is Ricky Lee Jones' Pirates.
Right.
And I know she has a lot of connection production-wise, and I think it would probably be fair to say influence-wise from that. And for the first time, there was one particular track on there, I thought, bloody hell, that sounds like an outtake from Pirates. And I Pirates came after. So I think, I could hear that influence playing into her stuff. But again, Ricky Lee Jones, I found something very human and emotional, and endearing, charming, whatever, that I can never quite get through on the Steely Dan. However, sort of amazing guitar solos and the very clever drumming, and it's all. So I don't know. But having said all that, I would say yes. I can hear that it would deserve to be in 100. It's obviously like a quality thing, but it doesn't necessarily connect with me.
Okay, so number 3, I think the UK, number 5 in the US, sorry, number 3 in 3 in the US, 5 in the UK, my apologies. So sort of your transatlantic success, 3 big hit singles, Peg, Deacon Blues and Josie. And, you know, from that, you're right, there's a lot of kind of, whatever you think of the album, there's a lot of
Mm.
influences coming away from that. A lot of people have literally went in there and picked pieces out or used them to help them sort of further their career and stuff. So again, one of these acts that, you know, it's hard to separate the record, which I guess is what we're primarily here to do, and also the influence that the records had, or the band have had, which feels quite a lot, I think, for Steely Dan.
Massive, yeah.
Maybe come back to that when we have a vote on it. George, what's your take, mate?
It's as smooth as a baby's neatly powdered backside. It's I like Steely Dan, but if you'd have just taken the three big records from it, the, you know, Deacon Blues, Josie, and one of the greatest earworms in history, Peg, a track which Walter Becker doesn't even play on.
Right.
It would already be a cracking album, but it's the first, again, this is another one of these albums, it's the first time I've heard it in years. So I was expecting it to connect with me more than it actually did. I liked it, you know, back in the 80s when I first heard it. You know, I heard it as a teenager back in probably about 84, but about the time I'd be listening to Chris and, you know, Friends Again and things like that. So
can I just ask a quick question? Because something struck me in a slightly horrible way today. The song Peg, which you mentioned, I realised that it's not a song I'm ever aware of hearing, but there is a Friends Again song that seems to kind of, well, you could say rip off that. Of course, like, shit, did I inadvertently rip off? Because I think it was me that wrote the bit, but
happy to pause the recording at the moment, Chris, if you want.
For copyright issues, I think it might be wise. You know, and I'm now questioning. I thought I wrote that bit, but maybe James Grant, the massive Steely Dan, sneaked that bit in, and I didn't even notice.
Yeah, he's got the crossover with Gary Catt.
Massive. Oh yeah, they had some great run-ins with Gary Catt.
Definitely them, mate. Definitely them.
And Fagan,
It's I love Steely Dan, but it just, I actually, when I after listening to this, I went back and listened to Can't Buy a Thrill, and I much prefer that album. I think it's a much better album. There's great songs in it as well.
Right.
This one's
is that because it's his debut album, do you think? You know, that kind of, you know, so many great debut albums comes out.
But you have two singers on that first album.
They do.
David Palmer singing as well. He sings Dirty Work on that first one. It's a very different feel. But
you've got Michael McDonald on Asia.
You do, and he provides, you know, some of the greatest blue-eyed backing vocals I've ever heard in a song when he hits those high notes on Peg. It's got so many legends involved in it. Bernard Purdie and Steve Gadd, the drummers, Larry Carlton playing on it. But there was something about it. It was, although I enjoyed listening back to it, I was like, nah, I need to go back and listen to Can't Buy a Thrill, because I do prefer that Steely Dan. It's a wee bit less polished. Whether it makes it in the 100, possibly because of the three songs, Deacon Blues, Josie, and Peg, and the title track. Those songs probably swing it into the 100, but I wouldn't, as long as Can't Buy a Thrill is in that top 100 somewhere, I'm okay with that.
Well, it's not at the moment, so
that's interesting.
That's ridiculous. That is a fucking.
Who's your vote in, George? Who's your vote in?
Nah, I'm going to save it for something really left field. And I'll make it a compilation just to piss John off.
What about a compilation live album? We could do that.
Live compilation.
So this is 40 minutes long, so it is very much for sweet spot, I think, for length. You know, there's 8 songs on it, around about 5 minutes each, so they do stretch them out a little bit, but not, you know, that is a bit that jazz rocky. It did get moved into kind of yacht rock, didn't it? They ended up categorizing it into that world, which became a little bit of a sort of criticism, really, if you were in there.
I quite like yacht rock. I've got
easy listening.
I love Boys Skaggs. You know, give me Boys Skaggs. I hope there's a Boys Skaggs album in there.
Not yet, mate.
Degrees.
Not yet. One of my favourite ever records is actually classed as yacht rock. You know,
Which
believe
one?
City to City, Jerry Rafferty.
Oh, Jerry Rafferty. Yeah.
Love that, and I don't know why, but it is. So,
Silk
there we
Degrees
go.
by Boys Skaggs. That's like one of the greatest yacht rock albums of all time.
Edo Shuffle, fantastic.
Fantastic.
Stephen, what's your take on Steely Dan?
Strange one. I don't know if it's my age. I think I just missed them, and I've never really caught up. I've been trying this week and listening, and I love it. You know, but I don't think I'm qualified at the minute to make a justified decision on it. You know, but,
Okay.
but I'm going to have to.
You are indeed. We're going to take you in a second. So it wouldn't have been something back in the day, but going back to it now, it's quite impressive. Is that your take on that?
Oh, I'm loving it.
Right.
As retrospective, yeah, it's something I wish I'd heard years ago. You know, but it's one of those ones you slipped the net. You know, and because there was so much happening at that time, there was so many bands going flying at you, you could not possibly catch them all.
That's very true, especially as Chris said, I think we were all kind of, or I certainly was in that time where, you know, things were changing. But if I'm being honest with you, I mean, I loved all the punk stuff, but I also loved ELO and guys like that. They were all huge at that time, you know. So
we were going to the same stuff. I know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I went out one day and bought ELO, Pistols, and Rush in one day.
Yeah, but go, mate. There's three for a list.
Yeah. What I said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Okay, so again, Stephen, you know, bit of a fan. Are you edging towards putting it on, do you think?
I'm edging towards putting it in. The more I hear it, the more I hear it, I think, oh my God, that's pretty damn good.
Well, a couple of things just to finish then we'll go round on it. So they could potentially, you like this one, they could have had Chevy Chase as their drummer.
Really?
Wow. They were all at the same college together and played in a number of bands around that time, including the kind of first band that Becker and Fagan kind of got together, and Chase played a few times with them, but he obviously moved on to be doing sort of theatre and acting, and then did what he did. So there you go. But it seemed like he's a bit of a drummer, you know. And also there's a great cover of Deacon Blues by Bill Callahan and Bonnie Prince Billy on one of their 2 records. I can't remember which one, but it's really good. Very much what you'd expect them to do, sort of downbeat and what have you, which is great. I mentioned Michael McDonald and Jeff Baxter, who of course became the Doobie Brothers off the back of all this, which again is a bit of a CV. And the earworm, George, you mentioned, of course, became the sample.
I know
from De La Soul, which I think we probably all know. Want to sing it, Lisa?
No, not singing tonight.
Not tonight.
I love you better.
My voice was terrible last week. It's going to be worse this year.
Can't be worse than mine. Okay, so, you know, there's a lot of stuff around it. There's a lot of great artists that you know, have tipped their hat to them. There's a lot of great artists came out of it. A lot of great artists played with them. So, you know, there is an awful lot of love for them around the industry. But up to us to decide whether it goes on the list or not. So I will go Lisa. Yes or no? You find this hard, Lisa, don't you?
I do find this hard. And I do. Steve was saying earlier, I just don't feel qualified to.
You are, though. You're a listener.
Correct.
That's it. End of. You're qualified.
I know, but I can see why they probably. I can see why they probably should go in.
What's your gut feeling?
As Chris said, it's just too polished for me, and just.
In or out?
I'm not going to say it was sterile because it's not sterile, but there was just maybe it's just his vocals don't lift it. I can't tell.
Sounds like an out.
In or out, no, Lisa?
I'm not putting it in.
It's out.
That's an out.
Thank you.
Oh, do you know what? I shouldn't be going on because I'm worried. I'm running out of wine here, so we better hurry up.
Okay, you can get another glass. So that was a no from Lisa. Chris?
Now, with the caveat, going back to what George said about, I think it was the first album.
Yeah.
Can't get a thrill.
Yeah.
Can't buy. Now, if that's a better album then maybe that should be in place of it.
It should be.
Then, yeah. The other caveat or question is this my 100, or is this a sense of me trying to, which I've just sort of, now I know it's late in the game halfway through, but like, am I trying to sort of give a view based on a, you know, a sense of, you know, a musical community, in which case I would say it's in, but if it was my very personal 100,
Your choice.
right, well, it wouldn't be in my personal 100, but I would substitute certain things that are like it. For example, the Ricky Lee Jones would go in.
Okay.
But so it's out for me then, that basis.
It's out.
Chris, that's how I have to vote things, because I'm not quite as knowledgeable as everyone else. So it very much is based on
your take.
I'm hearing.
Yeah,
okay.
Good. That's reassuring. Thank you.
George.
As I say, Can't Buy a Thrill is probably a better album. That's no problem. It is a better album for me anyway. But because the band's named after a sex toy, I'm putting it in.
It is indeed. A revolutionary steam dildo,
Lord.
to be precise. So that's a yes.
Sorry,
Haven't you?
my audio. I'm not sure my audio broke up there, but did you say a dildo
revolutionary steam dildo?
Steam.
Yeah.
I thought that's what you said, right? Okay.
Steam powered.
Steam powered. Not steel. Steam.
Okay. That could be a bit
Chris,
painful.
I'm glad that was before my time.
Yeah. I'll say I'm not wrong. Yeah, I'm not going to Google that. I just accept.
Yeah, because that'll be on your search.
Exactly. Yeah.
On your search.
Okay.
Stephen, let's move on quickly. Stephen.
Yes.
It's a yes, mate. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a yes and a yes? Was that what you said?
That's 3 yeses. Yeah.
3 yeses. Okay. Oh, hell yes. So John was a yes, and I'm a yes. So I would argue Can't Buy a Thrill, and we may, I guess, end up chucking it on the pile down the line somewhere. Nothing to say they can't have two on the list. But I do think the upsides are much more than the down, and it's probably one of these records. I think if I played it once a week for the rest of my life, I'd probably love it more and more, I think.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, all for another day. Okay, cool. Steely Dan is a yes. Okay, we are moving on to number 62. Got 2 to go, guys. 62 is Guns N' Roses with Appetite for Destruction. Okay, big deep breath. The biggest selling debut album of the 80s, Appetite hit the metal scene like an asteroid, bringing the grit and fury of 70s rock back to a mainstream hard rock scene that was starved for something real. Indiana bred Axl Rose's 5-alarm yowl bowled over listeners. Guitarist Slash gave the band blues emotion and punk energy, while the rhythm section brought the funk on hits such as Welcome to the Jungle. When all the elements came together, as in the final 2 minutes of Paradise City, Guns N' Roses left all other 80s metal bands in dust, and they knew it too. Quote, "A lot of rock bands are too fucking wimpy to have any sentiment or any emotion," Rose said, "unless they're in pain." Okay, that's the Rolling Stones summary. Guns N' Roses Appetite for Destruction, released in July 87. Okay. Go, George. Let's have it, mate.
This is the single greatest hard rock debut album of all time. It's fucking awesome. I've loved this since I first heard it. I had a tape of this album and I played it out. I walked about London with this in my wee Walkman, fucking head going. These guys were absolute punk. I was talking to Chris on Saturday about it, and we mentioned Guns N' Roses, and I can't wait to talk about this one. I love this album so much, and listening back to it.
George, I'm going for wine.
Okay, no problem.
It was so enjoyable listening back to this. It's not aged badly at all. Forget the 3 big hits, the Sweet Child of Mine, Paradise City, and Welcome to the Jungle. They're on their own. Songs like They're Out to Get Me, pure metal paranoia. Night Train, It's So Easy, Mr. Brownstone. It's a band who were top of their game. Every one of those guys brought something to the table, and the collective is greater than the sum of all its parts. That what they missed when after this album, it's the only album that all of those guys were on, because they got rid of their drummer, not long after this. He was too much of a fuck up, Steven Adler. But they were never as good after this album as they were when they had Steven Adler playing drums. And they ended up hiring Matt Sorum from The Cult. They took him to a ranch somewhere in Colorado, and they said, look, we want you to be our new drummer. And Sorum was like, well, I'm in The Cult and I love being in The Cult. And they went, do you like this ranch? And they went, yeah, I love it. And they went, it's yours. Sign the dotted line. So they gave him a fucking ranch to join. That's how big these guys became. But they were a band that sort of, they crossed the boundaries, the appeal boundaries. I knew a couple of Essex boys who were into the Shaman and fucking Happy Mondays who were Guns N' Roses fanatics because of this album. They demoed the album with Manny Charlton of Nazareth. And then they recorded the album in the Captain's studio, the Captain in Tennille. They recorded it in his fucking studio. And I love this album. It's in my own personal top 20 albums of all time, and I was so glad it's in here. It's, to quote, the critics don't like it. It's not a critic's choice album, but to quote Axl Rose himself, I see you standing there, you think you're so cool. Why don't you just fuck off? Absolutely love that.
Lovely, brilliant. It was huge. Interestingly, it took a long time to become huge. It was one of those slow burners that released, and then they went and toured it to death, and then they got some radio play. And the thing that broke them was they were badgering MTV, which of course was mega at the time, to play the videos, but a lot of the MTV stuff was a little bit, racing stuff for MTV. They wouldn't play them, and they ended up playing, I think it was Welcome to the Jungle. They ended up playing it at 5 o'clock in the morning on MTV once. They allowed them one play of it at 5 o'clock in the morning. And the feedback that they got from it was so big that they then had to put it on the roster. And then after that, it became...
Well, the song Welcome to the Jungle is actually used in the last Dirty Harry movie. The very last Dirty Harry movie. The song's used right at the start. And it's for a video. And there's an actor in his first, I think it's his first movie, singing the song as if he's Axl Rose, and the actor's Jim Carrey.
All right.
In the very last Dirty Harry movie, he sings Welcome to the Jungle, he mimes it. And there's another wee bit of trivia for this. There's a link between this album and McEwen's Sweetheart Stout. Remember Sweetheart Stout?
Yes.
There's a direct link from this album to Sweetheart Stout. Because the woman on the remember there used to be a woman on it, a 50s kind of woman on the
on the can.
On the can.
Yeah.
That is the mother of Erin Everly, who was married to one of the Everly brothers.
It's Don Everly's daughter, isn't it?
Don Everly's daughter is Sweet Child of Mine. So there's your trivia link for the night.
Yeah, mate. Listen, you've emptied it there big time.
I say I'm out. Because of Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, I brought the big guns.
Brought the big guns. Well, that's a resounding yes, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe it'll feel the love as we rattle around this one then. So,
I
Steve,
doubt it, but I would.
Stephen, are you jumping on that bandwagon with yours there?
This is going to be a quickie. I can't follow George Zappa's eloquence, but I absolutely adore this album. There's no ifs, buts, whats, whys, or annals about it. I just love it. Every time I get it going, my plums get pumping. It's just.
I'm not a big metalhead. I'm not.
Neither am I. Neither am I the slightest. I'm a slightly reformed old mod, but this album just gets me every time. Wonderful bit of work.
Yeah. Okay, I'd agree with that entirely. Okay, Lisa, let's keep going. Come on.
So yeah, I think it's a great album. Definitely. Okay. When that came out, it really wasn't what I was listening to at all, but I was obviously very aware of it. And like George said, a lot of my friends that were into other stuff were really into Guns N' Roses. And I think that's because we'd got away a bit from this of big hair metal.
Yeah.
And it got a bit more rough. And I can hear a bit of punk in this album as well. You know,
Yes, absolutely. So I completely agree with that. Yeah.
There's a real sort of punk underlying kind of current there.
There's also some grunge in there
Mc-
as well. There's a bit
What's
of
that?
grunge. There's a bit of grunge in there as well.
Yeah. So
Some total grunge.
Duff McLagan was in a punk band, late 70s, early 80s, before he obviously got into the LA sort of heavy rock scene. So you're dead right. I think they all came from that. And one of the things I was going to call out was the covers album that they've done, Spaghetti Incident. If you haven't listened to it, it's outstanding.
Yep, it's good.
Outstanding. Because they take an homage to the Damned and the New York Dolls and a whole bunch of people, and they just play them straight. And they play New Rose, and it's like 2 minutes 20 seconds or something, and off again. And you know, I think they very much kept that attitude coming through their records, even when they became sort of more heavy rock and stuff. So you're dead right, Lisa.
I could hear that coming through, and I'll be honest, it's not a record I listen to.
Yeah.
I tend to remember the hits, and I also have to confess that when I hear when the guitar starts at Sweet Child of Mine, I'm just like, oh, out of here. But that's probably just purely overplay for me. I have enjoyed listening to the album, and I think they've achieved something pretty incredible considering they were fucked up at the time. But then, I mean, there was loads of bands. They're not the only band to be out there partying and tearing it up and producing a good album.
Not at all.
But
They're probably the only band that the drummer and the singer were sleeping with the same person at the same time in the studio, and they subsequently recorded some of them making out, and it's on the record. So not many bands doing that, I don't think.
Well,
How do you know that?
Listen, I know from the horse's mouth there's a band from Greenock and Gourock that split up over a woman, and it was the same. It was the singer and the bassist. So,
Right.
But I say no more.
Yeah, nothing to do with me, Lisa. Nothing to do with me. Yeah, so I know that because one of our friends on Twitter.
Because I know all three of them, the women and the two guys.
If you don't have a big fallout over a woman, you can't call yourself a proper band.
You're not a band, are you? So, they both had the same girlfriend for a while, and in effect, the girlfriend slept with Axl Rose to annoy the drummer Steve Adler, and they ended up having sex in the studio, and somebody recorded it, and it's on the last song, Rocket Queen. And the reason I know all that was I knew a little bit of it, but one of our Twitter friends, John, Carol Younger Boy, he gives us snippets and stuff. So thanks for that, mate. I did ask him who recorded it. I couldn't tell me that. So
did they split up over her?
Well, he left the band not too long after.
He was kicked out the band because he was a mad drug addict. But
this band split up, so that is rock and roll.
So #1 Billboard, I think it's still the best-selling debut album ever in America. I think it was 147 weeks in the chart. After it hit the charts, it stayed in for another 147 weeks. So it's a chunky boy. Chris, what can you add to that, mate?
Oh dear! Well, you need a contrary opinion. I mean, I'll be the outlier in this.
Of course we do.
I'll be the outlier. Where to start? I think maybe the thing that caught my attention, which I had no idea about, was they considered Paul Stanley from Kiss for production. Now that's my kind of into maybe why I don't like this record, because I could not stand Kiss.
I don't like Kiss. Never have liked Kiss.
Right. So okay. So please bear with me, because I appreciate this record just passed me by. You know, I didn't have the experience of wandering around London with my headphones. You know, but I can see. You know, I could have gone down that route, but my complete antipathy to things like Kiss and that whole tradition of kind of cartoon-like American heavy rock bands. I think that's what I'm detecting in Guns N' Roses that it really puts me off. Having said that, I'd listened to the album for the first time in years. In fact, I don't think I've never listened to it as an album before. I've just heard the singles, and my overriding takeaway is I find Axl Rose's vocal extremely histrionic, hysterical, and unappealing. It's a sort of cartoon version of America. I am fascinated by the bad behavior, so I'm being sucked in a little bit, even having this discussion. So I'm like, okay, I'm now a bit more intrigued against some of the, but it's overall it's a no for me, but I think there's more for me to explore. I just don't really warm to this very hyped up heavy version of heavy rock, or generally. As I say, Kiss is the sort of point I go, oh shit, Kiss.
Yeah, I can't bear Kiss.
I know. Well,
like
there's some that tainted by an association, which I didn't even know. I'll be honest, I didn't know there was an association, but that's chiming with me.
Feel quite show busy. Those Kiss and Motley Crue, there's a show busy element to them. Whereas I don't get that. I get more of a punk vibe.
I get that. Yeah, I see where you're coming from, because I detected, I think, George, you might have mentioned to me when you said how much you loved this on Saturday.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned the Stooges.
Yeah.
And I could hear that in it, but I'm much more drawn to the Stooges. I can see they're kind of cousins, but this is a more theatrical.
Yeah.
The Stooges felt more real. And I'm not saying it isn't real, it's just it has that hyper theatrical aspect that has more of it's somewhere towards Kiss and away from the Stooges.
In a strange way, I think those three big hit records didn't do them any good.
Maybe, well, I'm living proof of that. Yeah, I kind of found it a bit off-putting.
And as Lisa said, as soon as she hears the guitar start, with Sweet Child of Mine, it's like, enough. And I think it was just overkill.
Yeah.
It was so much.
So, when something becomes that popular, it can be off-putting.
Yeah, for me, I fast-forwarded those tunes because I'm like, I've heard them so much, I don't need to listen to them again.
Yeah.
But when I listened to, It's So Easy, Mr. Brownstone, They're Out to Get Me, I was like, fuck,
That's
this
good,
is why I love this in the first place.
The tracks that caught my ear were ones I wasn't familiar with, like Night Train. I really loved.
Night Train,
it's a great song.
So you're right. The other ones are so familiar. It's kind of like overkill, kind of MTV generation.
So it's interesting. It's interesting you say the. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Chris. I was going to say, in case I forget, it's interesting you mentioned the Iggy Stooges connection there, because they do cover Raw Power on Spaghetti Incident.
Okay. Well, I'm liking them a wee bit more again.
So you're right. There's a theatre, for want of a better word, to them. But when they started, it wasn't like that. I think George's comment's a fair one. That obviously became theatrical because of how big they became and some of the issues that come off the back of that. But they were pretty punky when they started.
Well, I think I would definitely go back and listen again, because some of the things here are giving me more of where they were coming from. Some of the things that have been said.
Would you have a classic rock, would you, in your head, is there like a classic rock record that you would say, actually, that's the way a great rock or heavy rock record should sound like? Is that something you would have?
Not particularly. It's not a genre I particularly like. This, whatever this strays into, I didn't even particularly like Led Zeppelin at the time. Again, it was that sort of crossover. Some people were into punk, and there was kind of silly barriers that tended to spring up around things. You tended to stay in your area, and I've tried to it's more tribal. Things like Zep, I do like a lot now. It's sort of grown into it, but you're what the band's Rainbow and
Whitesnake and all that.
Whitesnake and all that kind of stuff just left me cold.
Rush?
Rush. I mean, I've got a very good friend who went to see Rush many times at the Apollo.
We've had this chat, Chris. Absolutely.
I was like, no, we're going to see the Buzzcocks. You're going to see Rush. That's
I can work the mute button on this. It's a thing. I think it's interesting to get that perspective, and it's exactly why we do this, because it's very rare that we have a slam dunk record. Nearly always, at least one of us says, not too sure about that. So you're perfectly right to challenge it. I think a wee bit of Steely Dan, actually, I think maybe there's more in it the more you dip into it. And
like many records, that's true.
Yeah, true.
You're always wary of condemning something, and I can hear this is a record that I could end up loving if I persevered with it.
53 minutes long, so it's getting a wee bit toppy, but I think there's 11 tracks, I think, on it, so it's, you know, it's probably still strong enough to kind of hang in there. 64% Twitter was yes, so they were giving us a bit of a hard time on these five, but they were fine to back that one. I don't have much more to add, really. Talked about how big it was. I like the fact that when they were touring this, the actual Rosie got arrested somewhere in Central America, I can't remember, Midwest or somewhere, pre-gig. Yeah, basically had a fight with the bouncers and stewards and got arrested before the gig, but they just sent a roadie on to do the gig.
Really? Wow.
Just did the whole gig, right? And
Fantastic, yeah.
it's finally I had the notice, to be honest, which I mess a bit of worry for Axel.
Stick on the bandana and
Yeah. And also kind of PPS to all that, back to our previous podcast, you mentioned the producers there, and they also consider getting Mutt Lange to do it, and we're not particular fans of Mutt Lange on the podcast because of the AC/DC Metallica connection. And also, George, I was thinking of you, mate, so they did a co-headline tour with Metallica, and I think it was 92, I think, so Guns N' Roses.
They had, by the time they got to 92, they'd started becoming the kind of cartoon band that Chris had talked about there. And that video, November Rain, if you want to see like 90s excess, that's the one. That's one of my favourite videos of all time. The song's fucking murder, right? It's awful. But the video is just so over the top. It's brilliant. It's almost as good as Bonnie Tyler's Flip to the Heart. They're the two best videos of those years. They're the best of the 80s, best of the 90s. Fucking love them.
Do you know I think it's the longest ever top 10 song, November Rain.
Is it? It's a terrible song. It's so
8 minutes and 50 seconds. 57
too
seconds.
much. But the video is brilliant. I'd urge anyone who's not seen the video to watch the video and try not to piss your pants.
So last thing about sort of things we learn before we go and piss our pants. So I didn't know this. So there was a potential libel copyright challenge. I don't know, George, I don't know if you'd heard this before, to Sweet Child of Mine, which I genuinely didn't know until I was doing a quick kind of read up on tonight, by a song called Unpublished Critics by a band called Australian Crawl. And went and Spotified it, as you do, and had a listen, and it's surprisingly like much closer to this whole Ed Sheeran Marvin Gaye thing that's going on just now, right? Which is that nonsense. Properly to the point where Duff McLagan heard it and says, "Bloody hell," you know, it's. So he said I genuinely had never heard that before, and I'm sure that's the case. But yeah, like very similar. Like most of the song, no, kind of from the same sort of mid to late 80s time in Australia. So
it's like that Rod Stewart one. Do you think I'm sexy? And he basically just stole the whole tune from this Brazilian tune called Taj Mahal. It's like it's absolutely. Do you think I'm sexy? And he
got away with it, didn't he? I think.
No, he put his hands up and went, "Oh, I didn't realise," but all the royalties went to UNICEF.
Right.
I think after that. So
right.
Rod's way out.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's rattle around then. I'll start with John this time. John is. I don't want to misquote John because he'll have me. John is a yes to Guns N' Roses.
Oh, surprising.
Yeah, a little bit too.
I thought he would.
Chris.
It's a no from me.
No from Chris. Stephen.
Yeah, I'll go with a Twitter 46.
Stephen.
I'm tearing up my Bathers records, right?
I'm surprised because I could hear a lot of the Bathers.
Yeah, that's great. I know. Indeed.
Stephen.
It's the vocals, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Take me down to Kelvin Grove, baby.
Yeah.
Stephen.
Again, right. Surprisingly, I want that in.
You're a yes, mate. Of course you are. Lisa. Lisa.
I know, I'm listening. I'm doing my usual.
George.
Despite, no. Hey, don't rush me. I've been very good tonight. I haven't gone on too much.
Yeah.
I've been working the morning.
A couple of tracks in that I thought were like really mediocre. I think I'm going to vote it in.
Cool. And George, you're in love, right? So
What it was.
absolutely. Okay, we're 5-1, 5-1 there. Sorry, Chris, mate. That one goes in.
Fair enough.
We'll see. We'll get you back on and you can re-review it for us.
Yeah.
See what you think.
See if it
Summer
change.
Downway.
Yeah, I might persevere with it.
Absolutely.
You
Okay.
know what? At least you've missed Metallica.
Yeah,
Indeed.
dodged a bullet.
You're
Yeah.
lucky,
That
Carl.
went down well.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're downhill here, guys. Last one to finish
Mhm.
on 61. So another one straight out of Chris's songbook. This is Eric B. and Rakim with Paid in Full. So, thanks, Stephen. Ice grilled, laid back, diamond sharp. Rakim was the 80s greatest rapper, and this album is the record that cemented his legend. Paid in Full was one of the first hip-hop records to fully embrace 70s funk samples on stone hip-hop classics such as I Know You Got Soul and I Ain't No Joke. With a stark, chill, declamatory flow that broke from the sing-songy style of most rapping at the time, Rakim moved hip-hop from stories around the world of the hood to ones about the mind. Eric B built the title track out of a luscious sample bass line, and Rakim recounted days of poverty when he had nothing but sweat inside my hand, a problem solved by this debut's platinum success. So that's the last one tonight, guys. Eric B and Rakim, which was released in July 87. So we'll get a bit of speed on this one. Stephen, you were absolutely shouting about that one there, so come on then. Eric B and Rakim.
I've got this very functional, very short and sharp. I don't like it. I really don't like it. I don't like any semantics or details, whatever, but no. It's not for me.
So it's not for me. That's simple. You don't like it, and you're out. Okay,
yeah.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go other end. Chris, what do you think of Eric B and Rakim?
I'm glad I didn't go first on that one. I find it. I mean, I've listened to it. I can't. I've no sense of having listened to it. It was so sort of bland, generic. It just went over my head. Again, I checked with a couple of pals. I said, "What?" And they said, "Oh, I love it." No, a couple of listens, and no, it's fine. Again, it's not really a genre I listen to a lot of, so I didn't have a handle. But
and the pals you asked, would they be sort of fans of hip hop rap?
No, just music fans. You know, again, well, it was Callum who loves Steely Dan sneakily, as he put it. He's also I love Eric B. Yeah, but no, it just I can barely remember what it sounded like. It just sounded so kind of generic to me.
Well, it came from the genre it came from or created was called Golden Age hip hop. So it actually became massively influential, I think mainly from sort of New York scene. And a lot of the bands that came through that, you probably would start to pick up on some of that going, actually, do you know what? Quite like this and quite like that. So this was their debut album. I think we mentioned this on the last record. They had no money and they got a recording deal and they basically had so much time to make the record. And that's what they done. So they sort of, crammed their time, probably sounds familiar, Chris, to get a debut record out there, to the point where he was rapping his lyrics straight off a sheet as he was sort of writing them. But perversely, it looks as if that's one of the reasons it became so iconic, because it was so different. And some of what they were doing was a lot flatter or a lot more. There was a lot less in it than some of that sort of the noise sort of hip hop rap that was around at the time. So almost by accident, I think they created some of this, and they ended up part of that whole Rick Rubin, Def Jam world, and some of the guys that were connected through that as well became pretty powerful. But if you don't get it, mate, you don't get it. That's why we're on. So
never say never, but far
recording 1 week. And very much, I think George might come in here, but very much the guys who started to put kind of, heavy sampling into to kind of hip hop and rap. So
this is, you've got an album, 1987, it came out literally, I think it's within about a week or two of Appetite for Destruction.
That's correct.
So both of these albums came out within about a fortnight of each other.
Wow.
And this is like, they're two polar opposites. I found it engagingly straightforward. But a lot of hip hop we've been listening to on this has been laden like a 50-dish buffet. It's like tons of samples, and you're like wading through hundreds and hundreds of different samples, and they're wearing their influences really, bold and bright. Whereas Eric B and Rakim, it's like we've got maybe 2 samples on this. We've got a beat and we've got a sample, and that's it. And we're just going to rap. And back in those days, I think you stood or fell by the quality of your beats and your rhymes. And I know You Get Soul, they borrowed that for the Bobby Bird 1971 cut to the same name, and it was later used, I think, the year after by Mars and Pump Up the Volume. So it was like listening to it again, I'd forgotten about this, and it was like, oh yeah, I remember this. Whether I liked it, I can't say I did, to be honest with you. What I did like about it, the thing I liked probably most about it was the Yamaha DX7. I can't remember which song it was, but there's a Yamaha DX7 keyboard playing on it, and I was like, I remember those sounds. I remember this. We had one, and we were like pissing about with it at the time. So at the same time as Eric B and Rakim were doing their stuff, my band was like playing with the same samples and the same sounds. So it sounded very different, of course.
You're probably very close to getting on the list, to be fair, George.
Yeah, we didn't record a proper album as such, so that's probably knocked us at the hundreds. So
you should have done a live album. I got that
I was
one.
going to say, do a wee live concert, we'll record it.
I've got live at the Barrowland on a tape somewhere, but that's
So these guys, Golden Age Hip Hop. And sitting in there, you've got LL Cool J, you've got Run DMC, you've got the Beastie Boys.
I like Run DMC. I did like Run DMC, and I like the Beastie Boys.
Mm-hmm. So their company's pretty good.
For the Beastie Boys, I worked briefly for the Beastie Boys. Very briefly.
Do you want to give us context to that?
I worked for EMI Records in London when Paul's Boutique came out, and I was working between the mail room and the publicity room, and I was sending out copies of Paul's Boutique and all the junk that went with it, and nobody wanted it. Nobody was interested in it. I was trying to get people interested in the Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique, and now, however many years later, it's considered a classic, and
Indeed.
Albums are changing hands for like 50, 60 quid a pop. I had hundreds of them. Couldn't give them away.
And I'm not entirely sure the Beastie Boys are on the list, to be honest. I haven't checked through that yet, but I didn't see them jumping out at me. So, a License to Ill maybe. There's certainly there's an argument there for sure.
Anyway, besides the point, Eric B and Rakim, no for me.
Okay, I don't have much more to add. That it wasn't particularly huge at the time commercially. Number 58 Billboard. It did have 5-hit singles eventually. So as the album started coming through, the Eric B's President and obviously Paid in Full, and I Know You Got Soul, which was the sample, and all those sort of things became really influential. A wee bit like Appetite for Destruction, George, where came out, didn't do an awful lot, and then as people started to hear it steamrolled a bit, but they didn't have a sort of big career off the back of it. They made another couple of records and then sort of done their own stuff and ended up falling out a bit on money and things that you do, I guess. But not much more to add to that. I think it's kind of a nice way to finish on the basis that we can't have views over everything that we listen to, good or bad. Sometimes it's just a record that we hear and we have a view on it and we sort of move on again. So cool. Let's just with Twitter, we're 73% no. I was just checking what the guy said. So again, probably getting a bit tired, Lisa.
Right.
Oh, sorry, Lisa. My apologies. I was just, you said something earlier there, and I totally forgot to come back to you. So, are you with Twitter on this? 73% no.
What you've been saying to me is really, she just talks shite, so we'll not even bother with what she says.
I messaged you and told you to come on the chat tonight, didn't I?
Right, I'll be quick. Right, I'll be really quick. Well, I might not, just to piss you off. So when hip hop really started like hitting our shores, I think I was at Edinburgh Uni, and starting to listen to it. It was like getting played in the clubs, and then I dropped out, moved to London for a while, and was listening to local radio stations. So I was listening to a lot of hip hop. I was really into LL Cool J. I was listening to the likes of Mantronics, which was hip hop, but with a real heavy electronica feel. So I feel as if Eric B, that's that kind of era, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, 87.
Yeah.
I really like this record. I really do. I really do like it. I think it's got really great hooks. It's very basic in terms of production, but then that's what hip hop was like at that point. It was quite raw, quite rough, and it moved on from there. I think they were really, really influential. I do love the album. I was bopping out about the kitchen earlier, cooking to it, and I have to say that it made me move a lot more than Guns N' Roses, I have to say. But whether I vote it in or not.
Okay. Well, I think it's interesting you like it. I'm just having a look at guys that directly influenced or influenced by them. And I think that all three of them, I think, are coming up. Nas, Jay-Z and the Wu-Tang Clan. I think they've all got albums coming on the list. And they've all did a call out to these guys saying, you know, without them, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
It's fucking their fault then.
Bastards.
Okay.
I think within that genre, they were actually quite influential, even though maybe we are not as familiar.
When Rolling Stone reviewed it, they said it was one of hip hop's perfect records.
So it was Eric B was the lyricist, wasn't he? And Rakim brought the finance. He got the finance organised, and they came together. They kind of and the beats, of course.
Eric B was DJ, I think, wasn't he?
But you want to maybe.
So
do I want to say you got it? You got it.
You do.
What do you think?
Paid full. So let's have a round robin on this one to finish then, and then we'll have a wrap up. So let's go with Lisa then, since you were.
Right, no, I do. I get where it's coming from. I was really into that kind of thing at the time. I appreciate the influence, but it's a no.
It's a no. Stephen, you were a yes, is that right?
No.
Just checking you're still with us, mate. Yeah, it was a resounding no. George?
I accept it's really influential, and I like how basic it is. It's a lot more entertaining because of that, but I wouldn't have it in a top 100, no.
Okay, Chris?
No, definitely not in the 100, no.
Okay, I'm a no as well. I'm slightly nervous about this one. I kind of feel as if I go back to it, I'm going to end up liking it more.
Keep playing it, you will, but it's still not in the top 100.
Yeah, and John was a no as well, actually. So surprisingly for the last one, it's the only one where we've had all six of us vote one out. So we're out there. So let's just summarise that. So that's a no. So I make that. James Brown was a yes. Outkast was a no. Steely Dan was a yes. Guns N' Roses was a yes, and Eric B and Rakim was a no. So we've got another 3 on there, which I think gives us 23 out of 40, I think.
So now we have to ask Chris for his choice.
We do.
Substitute. Okay.
The floor is yours, Chris.
Right. It was one I was reminded of. The Steely Dan was the Ricky Lee Jones album, Pirates, and then I thought Pirates or the debut album. They're both great albums. I'll say Pirates. Though I love them equally, but I'll just say Pirates. I would love to see that on that 100.
So why would you say Pirates above the debut album?
It's got a sort of a certain humanity, a humor, a charm. It's very vivid. The lyrics are wonderful. The tunes are great. All the kind of lovely, amazing playing that's on the Steely Dan record is on Pirates as well. If that's, and there's a lot of merit in that. But I think her lyrics are more engaging, and her vocals more engaging. It's just a beautiful record, full of great songs.
When was that out, Chris? Roughly?
Now that's it. I would guess about, would it be 79, 80?
So was that her second album then after the debut?
The first one I think was 78, maybe the Chucky's in Love.
Yeah.
And then I think the second one was 1980, 79, 80.
So that's your final answer.
Pirates, final answer, yeah.
Ricky Lee Jones,
yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. We'll put that on the list. Any questions for Chris on that?
No, I'm going to dig it out and have a listen.
Yeah, good.
I don't have that. I was listening to the debut album just the other day, believe it or not. So,
yeah. Do you like the debut album?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, one of my favorites for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a bit Pirates is a bit glossier.
Okay, but it's a bit Steely Dan, is it?
It's a wee bit more Steely Danified.
Yeah.
But in a good way. That sounds all wrong, but
cool.
Now we know.
Brilliant. What we'll do is we'll add that to the list. So when we start adding our own submissions later, Chris, the guests will they'll go on the list. I think from memory, David Ross put Bobby Gentry on, didn't he?
Bobby Gentry, yeah.
Delta Sweetie, yeah. Delta Sweet, sorry. Cool, perfect. That's great. Okay, guys, that's brilliant. So before we finish, just a quick heads up on the next podcast recording. So our next 5 for our homework are Van Morrison, Astral Weeks, Stevie Wonder, Talking Book, Led Zeppelin, Led Zepp 4, the band.
Wow.
Again.
And Liz Phair, Exile in Guysville.
Wow.
So Chris, if that ticks all your boxes, maybe
I think I picked the wrong date. I think they all sound good.
Come back,
I've come a week early, but
listen, you're always never a stranger with us, mate. You'll be very welcome at any podcast in the future.
Lovely. It's been lovely to do it. Yeah.
So guys, that's our 5 for the next time, and obviously we'll sort some dates out for that. Quite interesting. Feels as if we're getting to that point now where the vast majority of the records are killers. Yeah, all killer, no filler. So
all killer, no filler.
Perfect. Chris, thank you very much again, mate. Really appreciate your time. We're all looking forward to a new record, mate. So no pressure.
Not long now. Just
brilliant.
final mixes.
I'm looking forward to the gig, 28th.
Yeah, web search. Yeah, good. That should be fun.
We're hoping to get the whole team. We're hoping to get the whole team to that.
Yeah. So where's the after show? Is it Order and More or something?
No, you decide where it is.
Fine, okay. I'll keep you posted.
Look forward to that.
Should be a good night. Yeah.
Any more guys? Should be good with that.
I'm hoping to be on a laptop next time and not scramble about my phone with absolutely zero notes or nothing.
Yeah, I know you're quite small, but you're not that small, are you? So we'll get you. Yeah, absolutely. Lisa, George, you good?
Yes, all good. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time, guys. As ever, really appreciate it.
Great to see you all.
We'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers, bye. Bye.